Hi everyone, how's it going? My name is Bonnie Violet. I'm a trans femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, digital chaplain. That's a lot to say.
That's a lot.
But you found yourself on the Trans Joy Boise podcast, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Pacey. I'm a trans, masc, non-binary, mental health and recovery advocate. So,
Awesome.
I'm glad that you found us.
Yes, definitely. I hope you've been checking out our past episodes. We've been starting to hear from folks. And people might be curious, where do we watch this? Where do we listen to this? And right now, the best place to find it is on YouTube. You can subscribe and then you'll get notifications. Or you can kind of connect through it and directly through like our Instagram and our Facebook accounts. We are working on getting it uploaded to be an audio podcast very soon. So keep an eye out for that. You'll be able to listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome.
So, okay, today we have an event tonight, and we kind of wanted to briefly touch on this. You'll be hearing about this after the event. So, the Supreme Court is hearing a case that is going to directly affect the trans community. They're hearing this probably as we speak right now. The case is called the United States versus Skrmetti, and Skrmetti is Tennessee's Attorney General. And he has placed a ban against transgender or trans youth's right to gender-affirming care. And this is being challenged by 3 families in Tennessee. And this is concerning because if this ban is upheld, then that'll set a legal precedent, and that could affect us, our right to get gender-affirming care, or any trans person's right to get gender-affirming care. And I'm really worried about it because this all seemed like something that was so out of the realm of possibility just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Just with, we knew that the right, I guess, doesn't like us. They don't like our right to even fucking exist at this point. And now that we're seeing it in actual cases across the country and at the Supreme Court, like the highest court, it's very frightening for me. And I think it's taking a lot of these worries and these fears out of just these abstract thoughts into the reality. This is actually happening.
Well, and what makes it more, I guess, it feels like more of an opportunity for more danger, because we're a state who already doesn't have access for our young people, versus potentially if there was a good outcome to this, then this could potentially positively impact throughout the U.S. Is there a feeling that it's not going to end well?
I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic, but I mean, I feel, being realistic, I am very worried about this because just the location, it's in Tennessee.
That feels like the most predominant feeling. So I don't want to put that on you, but it seems like a lot of people are very fearful of a negative outcome versus, I think, being excited about a positive. And I'm sure that's for a reason. And so I was just curious why people are leaning more toward it being a negative thing. Maybe because of how the Supreme Court is set up right now and who's on it and the likelihood of how it'll play out. I'm not sure.
That's a really good point. And I think personally, and I feel like this is a general opinion, we'll say, it's everything that's happened.
Yeah.
So if you would have asked me, it's like this domino effect that's happening that was set into motion on November 5th, right?
Yeah.
I think that if you were to ask me what I thought was going to happen a month ago, I probably would have been a little bit more hopeful.
A little more optimistic, yeah.
But now things seem to be changing so quickly, and with all of these people that are coming in that were directly involved in Project 2025, and just how as soon as Trump has been elected, it's like this rhetoric is like, now, like, we're going to change it immediately.
Right.
And I think that this is just the beginning of the anti-trans legislation under Trump. I mean, we've already seen so much of like the anti-drag, all of these things, but this seems like that, but on a much larger scale.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people are talking about that, it starts with the youth, but then it's going to potentially work out to where it'll potentially ban all trans and non-binary existence.
I feel like I was talking about this with a barista at the Flying M last night, and I feel like they're kind of testing the waters right now, like with adolescents, with minors. And if they can get away with that, with banning this, because it's all coming down to parental rights and state authority. So the states want to be able to dictate what these kids can and cannot do, and that they have the right to make those decisions over the parents.
But the Supreme Court hearing, their kind of the argument is it's a sex discrimination. Is that correct? That's kind of how the ACLU is going at it, and the three defendants. Is that what they are? The defendants. That they're like kind of claiming it as sex discrimination, and that's already been proven. Like that's not allowed already.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, I'm not one to talk about this stuff.
No.
But it's like we have to. It's so wild because we kind of have to learn this stuff, because it is going to impact. And I think also like when you're trans and you're out in the community, I mean, we're like in kind of a leadership role and we're more visible, but I think every trans person probably ends up will get questions about this from family members or friends or coworkers or whatever. And so I definitely encourage folks to to just learn a little bit more about it. We're going to have like a video of the live stream from the event tonight where the ACLU of Idaho lawyers will be explaining the hearing in a lot more detail and answering folks' questions. And so we'll put that in the description of this episode. So if you're interested in learning more that way, you can check it out there. But there's also lots of really great, we've been sharing a lot of really great stuff on our socials, as well as there's just a lot of, I think, great opportunity to learn. I'm still struggling with like saying it in a beautiful way, but I am coming to understand it a lot more just by being able to check out other people's socials and listen to interviews and that sort of thing too.
That's a really good point. I thought that I was so well informed on these things until I really started to look into it a little bit more. Like when I was doing the interview for the Boise State volleyball thing, I realized how much I didn't know about these things, and it feels empowering to know about it because for the exact reasons that you mentioned. Now I can go and educate people that have no idea, and it's not that people should be looking this stuff up, like they don't know. You don't know if you don't know. And it really, I think, has been helpful to inform more people because I feel like so much of these things happen and a lot of the legislation is passed because we don't know that it's happening.
Right.
It's very like with the anti-drag stuff, it was very like, hey, this is this shiny, upsetting thing, look at this. And while we're all looking here, they like passed this anti-trans legislation. So I totally agree. I think that us being as informed as possible is definitely just crucial right now.
And one thing is that they are having the hearing today, but the actual results and the judgment or whatever the final results, if you will, of the hearing won't even be announced or shared until June, I believe, of this year.
Yeah,
so it won't even be till this summer before we really have any clear idea of what actually happened or what the result of today.
I forgot about that. That's awful.
So, and I think that's a lot of why we wanted to have this conversation with our community as well, is because everything feels like it's so right now. And in some ways it is right now, but also we're going to be, and I think especially where we're in Idaho, where we don't have access to healthcare for young people, we're going to still have to wait, 6 months before we hear anything for that. So in the meantime, families are still coping with not having access to this healthcare for their young people. And that's something that we're also hoping to be able to create an opportunity to have more of a conversation with the community about. Not only tonight at the event, but also just through this podcast.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that we did want to touch base on, which is related to the topic, is we did have a message on our socials earlier this week. So feel free, if you have questions or comments, do reach out to us on our socials. It kind of really does help us with, these episodes and what we talk about. So one of the questions that came from an individual, I'm not going to share their name just because I didn't get that cleared as of yet, but longtime ally and friend of that I've worked with over the years. And his question was, because we've been posting a lot of this stuff, and his question was, doesn't gender affirming a care doesn't gender-affirming care save lives? I don't understand why they would ban it. And then he said, also, I admit, there is a lot I don't know about this topic, but I feel safe asking you because you are part of the community and I need to learn more. Which I think a lot of our folks are kind of in this spot within our community and outside of our community. Yeah. So what would your answer be to that question? I think the question to answer is gender-affirming care life-saving?
Absolutely, I think it absolutely is.
And I know a lot of the times we talk about like the suicide rates and which is devastating and tragic, and it is something that's significant. But one of the challenges I've always had with our advocacy and communication is that we're always talking about like the suicide as like the main loss of life, but we lose life in so many other ways, and gender affirming gives us life in so many other ways. Whether it helps us to feel better in our bodies, it helps us to appear more consumable for public safety, being in public. Those sorts of things are going to increase our life. They're going to help us have more joy, more happiness, and more success, which to me is life. You know how like in the ballroom scene and the drag scene, they're like, oh, that gave me life, and some of it is just about like, it lifted me up and it like, and it gave me some strength and I'm like, I'm ready to go, even if it's just, I'm going to go give you $1. but it's also, I think, like gender affirming care gives life in so many other ways too, and it's important for us to talk about our quality of life is like, maybe some of us aren't suicidal, but we are still losing our lives and we're losing opportunity to have more life within the lives that we're living. And I think that's something I'd love for us to be able to talk a little bit more about. It almost sometimes feels like it's a privilege that not everyone has access to, but I think it's something that maybe more people will relate to.
Totally.
This idea of like, are there things in my life that I don't get to do because of blah, 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 blah. I don't know, but I've always felt like life, it is giving life, but it's giving life in so many different ways. I remember when I've had HIV for like 26 years now, which it was World AIDS Day earlier in the month, so I wore my little red ribbon. But I've been living with it for 26 years, and medication, or my life-affirming care, if you will, for HIV is something I've had to take my whole life. But when I was 21, when I was 21, I decided to stop taking my medication because my medication was making me so sick that I wasn't having a quality of life. I wasn't living a life that I wanted to live, and I thought if I was going to die soon, I would much rather be not medicated and live shorter. And so at 21, I decided to stop my medication. And so I went 6 years, thankfully, without taking any medication at all from 21 to 27. I went to the doctors, got my stuff checked regularly, but one of the things that was really important was I felt like that medication was really difficult for me because it was a constant reminder that I was dying, that I was sick, that I was a fuck up because I got HIV to begin with, all these sorts of things. And so at that time I was taking my pills and taking care of myself because I didn't want to die. And by the time I was 27 and I was about to receive an AIDS diagnosis, I wanted to live. And so once I started taking my medication, I began to live more, and I wanted more life. And I feel like gender affirming care is the same thing for me. Like, it helps me and affords me the opportunity for me to live and get my life, whether it's just being well enough to get a job or do the things that I need to do to take care of myself, or to be able to look in the mirror and like what I see, Yeah,
that's beautiful. It's so scary.
Yeah.
It stresses me out to think about you at that time.
Yeah, well, I mean, things are so different now, but I was 21 too. I was just a baby in so many ways, and I was like, I don't know, it was a difficult time. I'm grateful that I got through it, and I think that's why I love getting older now. But yeah, it was definitely a difficult decision, but it was still a decision that I could make.
Right.
And these bans are taking that decision away from individuals, young people and their parents, and in some cases, and in some places, even adults, or it's just down the road at least.
Yeah. I like that, it's taking away our autonomy, our right to choose if this is the life that we want. And I think that that's not only really powerful, but like you said, not everyone immediately knows that they want to, go through with transitioning or living this life, because it can be really difficult and scary. But that's still your right to choose that.
Right.
And I really like that you touched on quality of life, because I think that, of course, like you touched on suicide rates, trans people and just people in the LGBTQIA family at all are much more likely to experience, substance use disorder, self-harm, and suicide.
And violence against us.
And violence against us, and like damage to our property, so many things. So it's difficult. I mean, I know people that have died by suicide for this, for not being able to live authentically as themselves. And I really worry about the kids right now, because one of the families that is involved in this case talks about it very candidly, about this gender affirming care is life-saving for our daughter. And I can totally see how that would be, because you're living this life that is muted and dulled, and you are hiding in every sense of the word. And you don't want to do the things that you're passionate about. You just live life on this schedule and routine that was assigned to you that you don't care about. And that's not a way to live.
But I mean, and I think the thing of it is like there's so many non-trans and non-binary people, and even trans and non-binary people, that have access to other kinds of medical interventions, or even things to help them enjoy life better, whether it's getting plastic surgeries, or or like there are a lot of men, cisgendered men, straight and gay alike, who take testosterone like on a regular basis, because it helps affirm their gender. Like they might not call it that, but basically it does. It helps with their libido, which quote unquote not manhood, but a lot of people equate it to manhood. To like also just kind of like, I don't know, like like the of I guess being a man.
The machismo.
Exactly. And so and sometimes men who are like, men need help with that, regardless of where they're at in the spectrum of their gender experience.
Well, to address the question that was asked to us, right? This saves lives, doesn't it? Why would they ban it?
Good question.
They don't care, ultimately, because of what you're saying. Because in the legal documentation for this case, it says, and I can post a picture of it because I have a picture of it, that this only pertains to trans kids, basically. So, like, if there was a teenager who was assigned male at birth, he could be prescribed testosterone for a gender-affirming identity. And these other kids, as long as it aligns with their assigned sex
at birth,
then they can take it for like so many different reasons, different physical reasons that they would need to take it. But trans kids can't.
Yeah, which is just direct sexual discrimination, which is what the argument is all about.
Exactly. So they don't care that it's life-saving, because they're doing this directly to affect trans kids maliciously.
And there's no medical proof that says that there should be some sort of different experience for, say, someone assigned male at birth or female at birth for this medication. You know what I mean? There's not a distinction that like it doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like it's so it's totally like discrimination.
Yeah.
Because all the medical, I know you did a clip about it earlier in the week, but all the medical people are like, this is life-saving, life-affirming, necessary healthcare for young people to have access to.
Exactly. Yeah. Really prestigious medical organizations, have stated that this saves lives, that this is critical for trans kids, for their well-being, for the mental and physical
Mhm.
well-being. So,
And what is gender-affirming care for young people? What could that look like?
hormone blockers, puberty blockers.
And what does that do?
That will delay or just
Kind of pause.
prevent, their assigned sex puberty.
Right.
So that way, like, if there is an assigned male at birth, trans kid, and they take the puberty blockers in time, they won't go through a male puberty.
Right, so they won't be a chick like me who sounds like a man.
Yeah.
No, but I mean,
Yeah.
but that's a lot of like the people. People are afraid of that, and it's like no. And actually, a lot of the reason why they do that is so that they could wait until later to make that decision of whether or not I am in fact a trans person, and want to live as a trans woman or non-binary person who is on hormones or whatever, and so. The puberty blockers are typically all that's really given to young people in the beginning, again, just to kind of delay the process, which doesn't cause any sort of physical harm or damage. It just allows people to give them a little bit more time to get their mind together, to grow up, and then to be able to make that decision at a later date. There are times when kids may start hormones a little bit younger, but typically there's not surgeries happening. A lot of the time, gender-affirming care is just calling people by their name that they want to be called by, seeing them as the gender that they're expressing for themselves, whether it's at the doctor's office or at school or at home. And so it's also mental health care, being able to access health care to kind of help people cope with being a trans person. Not the fact that being trans is a problem or a bad thing, or that's really worth coping with, like something to cope with. It's really more so about dealing with how the rest of the world is treating us because of our transness and the obstacles and that is coming along with us. So even those sorts of situations, people won't have access to begin to talk about and explore and even just question a lot of things about themselves that could in some, who knows what the result of that could be.
It's just wild because the puberty blockers are such a great answer to this, because there are so many people that are saying, like one of the most ridiculous conspiracies right now. Yeah, where like they're going to school and they're getting sex changes.
Oh my
It's
God.
like, okay, all right, right, I wish,
It's
right?
ridiculous.
But yeah, so this seems like the perfect answer, right? Like it's nothing permanent, and it's just giving them time to really decide if this is what they want. And it's
So like you said, it's not about that.
It's
Like
not.
the people that are against this just do not want trans people, period.
exactly.
Like that's what it's about. It's hate, disgust, lack of understanding, lack of compassion, that is blocking them from, supporting and loving a fellow human being who is having a different experience than they are.
Exactly.
They might not understand, but why do you have to understand somebody to have compassion for them? Especially a lot of these folks claim to be like spiritual people
Yeah.
who care about one another and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, do you?
It's just so confusing as to how we all became such a major talking point in politics.
Yeah.
And I know it's a joke amongst a lot of, like, you see a lot of these trolls online, right? These right-wing trolls. And they joke about the suicide rates. Like, it's funny to them. And
There's nothing funny about it.
No.
We just spent a weekend at a drag show for, suicide prevention.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not a joke. When we think about how many people, I've lost close to 13 people in my life to suicide.
oh my gosh, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I keep a list on my phone, and I just, it's too much.
Yeah, well, and again, kind of going back to the HIV thing, I was diagnosed with HIV as a teenager, and I was under the impression that I would lose a lot of people to HIV and AIDS, and that hasn't been my experience. Like, I've lost more friends for being trans or non-binary or gay or lesbian or queer, and then either dealing with substance use, and or then, sometimes suicide is unclear, of it's an overdose or a suicide, but I think oftentimes they could be one and the same to some degree. But
I agree. I think, I've stopped going to funerals at this point. I've been to too many, and the vast majority of the funerals that I've attended, or just the people that have died, have been from suicide or an overdose, like you said. And like, there's a lot of gray area between like where one ends and one begins sometimes, and it's really affected me as a
breaks
person.
my heart a little.
I mean, I look back on the person I was, and I'm not trying to make this about myself really, but it's like it changes you just being surrounded by that much grief and loss. So now I'm really passionate about trying to prevent that in any way that I can. So when we see things like this happening on such a high level in our country at the Supreme Court, where this is going to potentially cause a lot of grief and suffering, I just am at a loss. I'm not sure really what to do moving forward.
And yet that's something that we have to do because it's one of the biggest like health concerns for our community.
Oh, absolutely.
And so it's just like you have like breast awareness for women. You have like as certain people get to certain ages, you screen for this, that, or the other. And I know there's a lot of stigma around suicide, and there's a lot of question of why it happens, and like could I have done something or whatever that we do similarly like with cancer and other things, but it does feel a little bit more oftentimes it's like you're blaming that person, or it's about not being strong enough, or this, that, or the other. But at the end of the day, it's just another thing that takes our life, and it's something that takes a lot of our lives, and we have to fight like hell to create a world and have access to the healthcare that we need to address these things so that we can continue to live and survive just as much as any of our other fellow humans that may not be a part of our specific community.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's been really positive to see the community start to come together just in the last couple weeks, really. And I'm hoping that it will continue to do so, because in the next few years at least, we're really going to need to rely on each other and look past our differences and the cliques and whatever, because we're family.
Right. Well, and I think one of the things I wanted to bring up as well too, we talked a little bit last week about the extreme of like excited to live as a trans person and be freaking scared about living as a trans person. And I think, we're talking about like suicide and end of life as well as like getting life, but there's a lot of that in between. There's a lot of a spectrum. There is gray area where harm can be done, and I think some of it is around harm reduction. What can we do to reduce the harm in our community? And that's really a lot of what we're trying to do, and just trying to create community opportunities for us to connect, whether it's online or in person or whatever. So that, all of that stuff begins to be harm reductive. It begins to spark joy or thought or inspiration into our hearts and minds, hopefully, and maybe our spirits, I know, but that kind of can allow us to continue to go and blossom and bloom and blah, 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 all that stuff.
No, it's so important.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people tell me that they really appreciate being able to get together with other trans folks in the community, because it's so easy to be isolated right now.
Yeah, and we're all starving for connection. Not just trans and non-binary people, but we definitely are. Yeah. Where do we go from here?
What else do we need to talk about?
So where are we at on time?
We had 12 minutes before, and now we're just at 20.
So we're around 30 minutes again?
Yeah, but there's a little bit we're gonna be removing, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can kind of close it out and, invite people to, we say, we're gonna go ahead and stop the conversation there. There's obviously more conversation to be had. We'd love for you to reach out to us on our socials, to continue the conversation, have the conversations with your family, that sort of thing. And
Absolutely.
then kind of just invite them to the next one.
Okay. Yeah, want to kick us off?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, We've run out of time for today. We've had a great conversation, and we're really only kind of just getting started. But we'd really encourage you all to continue to have these conversations either with us on socials or coming out to events that we're at, talking with your family members, your church members, your work members, or whatever. We just encourage you to continue the conversations and to continue to check out our podcast. We're shooting to have a podcast come out once a week. We haven't landed on a specific day yet, but just keep an eye out. If you subscribe and follow us, you'll be the first ones to know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we will keep you updated on what happens at the town hall meeting tonight with the Skrmetti case. And yeah, I think that's it.
All right.
See you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.